In this video today, it's with Monier Jalal, the Vice President of Marketing at Certik, a cybersecurity expert himself. He's leading the Web3 blockchain security at the premier audit company to check code and, with their best-of-class technology, protect protocols and smart contracts. They've secured over 360 billion worth of digital assets and have detected nearly 70,000 vulnerabilities in blockchain code. They provide end-to-end security. In our conversation, you're going to hear about MPC and atomic wallets, bridges, bug bounties, ethical hackers. What are the biggest mistakes builders and devs make? How is AI assisting, or should we say not assisting? And how do we reduce rug pulls with these bad actors? They've recently produced their Web3 Security Quarterly Report for Q2 2023. I'm going to put a link to it in the description below. It's very interesting to keep up on this part of today's blockchain ecosystem.
Thanks for having me. And just as an intro, so Monier Jalal, I cover marketing at Certik. I've been with Certik for a couple of years now. And it's an amazing ride in the Web3 space. And we've seen some interesting stuff. In terms of security, for sure, we have better peace of mind in the Web3 space, knowing that there are certain providers out there that are protecting us. And that's the principles there for me is joining the company is Certik is that leading company out there that's doing its job in protecting Web3. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're doing a lot of major protocols, and I've really seen the amount of work that you've put into the space as of late, and it's a lot of work. So let's get right to it. So you have this new report that just came out, and we're going to touch on that. It's quite interesting. Can you just maybe tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, so I got onto this idea of being able to think about providing statistics and information for Web3 folks out there, and particularly around security. And about 2 years ago, this whole report idea was born. And what you find with Certik is every year and every quarter we produce these reports. And the intent of these reports is to educate the folks out there of what's happening in terms of incidents, hacks, losses of funds, as well as provide some background as to what's happening in the Web3 space. So kind of tangential stuff, whether it's regulatory or technology based. And so, we're on, I guess, probably the eighth version of report, or eighth number of reports. Just interestingly, as we've kind of looked at what we've seen in statistics, back in 2021, the year itself entirety was $1.3 billion in losses. And then we moved into 2022, and we saw actually it skyrocketed to around $3.7 billion. And so now we're here in Q2. I don't think it's going to be as extreme as I'd say the last year, but it's kind of riding on the kind of the same lines as a decent amount of loss. In terms of the losses itself, so Q2 saw around 313 million in losses, which was kind of similar to Q1, but it was actually around 58 to 60% or so down from last year. And as I said, it's $3.7 billion last year. And so what is going on here? Well, and we've had a downturn of market, and obviously less investment in the market, right? And so total value of market and assets has gone down, and so that plays a role with hackers. They are kind of less of a threat landscape out there. And the other part is really education. I think we try to hang our hat a bit more about education in terms of letting people know around these vulnerabilities, what they mean, and security issues, and create awareness so people know how they can better secure themselves going forward. If we look at, double click a bit more into Q2 and what that really looks like, April itself actually witnessed the highest number of incidents. It was around 75 incidents, as stated in the report. And the total loss, or in the highest peak of Q2 actually came in June, which is around 135 million in total. If you actually look further into that, you'll see we have some statistics in there on graphs that show rug pull exit scams, and we'll talk about what those are in a minute. They took up the majority of number of incidents, around 98 in total. And then we look at the actual types of chains themselves. We see BNB experienced the highest number of incidents, around 119, 120, to the tune of 70 million. And then that was followed closely by Ethereum with around 66 million in total. So overall, the report is there in terms of kind of that breakdown. It gives you that flavor of both the types of incidents that took place, and also on what chains that happened as well.
Yeah, and I saw that you also did a companion video to that on YouTube, which was a kind of a short, concise synopsis of what is in the report. That was
Right.
helpful too, to understand what it is you're doing. On that page 3 in particular, can you talk about that in the report?
So if you kind of zoom in and look at page 3 itself, there's a breakout of types of exploits. There is we have exit scams, we have Oracle manipulations that are types of attacks that happen on the Oracle, and then there's an other category, which when we talk about other, it kind of points to different types of attacks that are happening outside of the general smart contract hacks. And those are typically like things like Discord compromises or wallet compromises, and we fit that into that category. But as you can see from that graph, you can see that the exit scams, as I mentioned, they take up the majority. Although the other category takes up the majority in the amount, exit scams takes up the majority in the count itself, right? And then by chain, if you look at that graph down below, you'll see that, as I mentioned, BNB, it takes up, the main chain that had the most incidents that took place. Ethereum does follow next in that whole picture. And then there's obviously the bundle of other categories of chains that we show in there as well.
There's many types of attack vectors, but what are the top 3?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's really 4, but let me just cover the 4th quickly, because it's the other bucket. And we're actually seeing a good amount of that play out within Web3. I call it Web2 style attacks, but if you think about marketplaces in NFT or wallets or social media, those are kind of more categorized in the Web2 space. And they do tie into Web3 because obviously, there are projects that have Discord servers, and there are projects that have marketplace websites, right? And the wallets come into play here as well. And so those are compromisable entities within the network, right? So that other category is there for sure. But the main 3 categories, if you just kind of slice it from the Web3 perspective, the first is web scams or rug pulls. And those are typically executed by the actual developers or the leaders themselves or the owners of the projects, where they actually launch a project, and often on some decentralized exchange, and then they actually inflate the token themselves. They run a marketing campaign, a really aggressive marketing campaign to pump up the token as much as they can, with the idea that they have investors that come in and invest in those tokens and build a huge community behind it. And at the end of it all, they disappear with the money, and termed the rug pull, right? Or they scam. And so we've seen a good amount of that taking place out there. They're not so much hack based or exploits on code, but they're more human security issues that we're dealing with as well. And we have solutions. We can talk about those as well around KYC, where we verify people. The second is, I touched on it, which is hacks themselves. Is really the smart contract itself. It's the code. And that really involves, and we were kind of discussing this before we started, somebody actually having access to the code, which is readily available on sites out there like GitHub, where people can actually look at the code and look for vulnerabilities. And by vulnerabilities, I mean just logical errors, things that you can manipulate inside the code to exploit, funds in there. And that really is what is the services that we provide, which is auditing around the smart contracts, is actually looking at the code itself, looking for those vulnerabilities and flagging those early before launch to these projects so they can fix them. So that's another category as well. And then the last category, which you kind of see come in and go in terms of strength and volume and number of attacks, is flash loan attacks. And flash loans are typically things that are related to borrowing without collateral. So you can actually make a transaction or a swap happen. And so what happens is the attacker will use a flash loan mechanism to borrow, to look at or manipulate the market and look at the price of a coin on one exchange versus the other. And the differences are always there. And then use a flash loan to actually use that to manipulate the difference and profit from that difference as well. And so not as wide as typical attacks or rug pulls, but we do sort of see those types of events take place.
So these price oracles, I'm just thinking, why do we see so much difference? Is it just the quality of the oracles themselves in the reporting of the data is so varied to take advantage of that arbitrage? I'm just curious why there's such a difference still, from chain to chain, depending on which oracle they're using to report back that price feed. Is it just a difference of quality of oracle?
I mean, it's that as well as data that's available, that's coming back. It's also real-time behavior is in terms of like how fast you're seeing that data. But a lot of it is to do with the availability of data and the ability to see that and act in real time fast enough to, deal with that discrepancy. It's new technology for sure, and it's an adopted new technology for wallets in particular. Multi-party computation is really, its advantages are that it uses multiple parties to provide security for the wallet itself, and that there is multiple keys being shared out there or being provided out there for access for the wallet.
Is it the same as a multi-sig? When people say
it's multi-sig still stays with the user itself, but multi-party is when others are actually involved in there.
So like for escrow on Ripple, you've got multiple parties that have to sign a transaction to make sure that it executes.
Kind of like that. You could think of it as kind of relationship-wise to something that has multiple people needing to sign off. Whereas, I mean, if you think about multi-sig, you can still compromise a single user because the single user has everything that is at one place, or maybe it's sitting on one place. Whereas multi-party, it kind of distributes the problem, where now you have multiple people out there that you have to get, to make this happen, right? Kind of escrow is like similarities where you have to get multiple signatures from different parties for this whole thing to transpire. Well, I mean, interestingly, the benefits of multi-party, or I guess the reasons for increased security in multi-party also have byproducts of kind of challenges, right? And one is splitting the keys amongst multiple parties, and if one fails, the whole thing fails.
Right.
So,
kind of like Ledger did recently, where they were trying to overcome the problems that if people lose their keys to their wallet, they've come up with that solution where 3 different entities can make it happen where that can be recovered, right?
Yeah, so the recovery mechanisms behind it is always through the backup system. But yeah, that's one, is the generation of the keys and the management of the keys. The second is, if you think about it, you've got now channels to these parties that are happening.
Yes.
That could be insecure.
Right.
You could have a man in the middle, which is somebody that intercepts the communication between parties and compromises.
Or even government.
Yeah. So that's another one. You've got really dependency, as I said, on people, participants who are involved, and with that, more so, the weakest link is really the problem. And so if you have a bunch of people and one of them has a weak setup and control of their key, that compromise of that key from that weakest link person compromises the entire system. Right. So a bit more about key management itself, or across multiple parties. And then generally implementation errors, MPC itself relies on a really complex cryptographic process, and with cryptographic processes, they are prone to errors in implementation. There's a blog that we have, and also a vulnerability we exposed within Zengo wallet, which was based on really the mistakes that were made around the API as a vulnerability as part of that wallet, and that still ties to the whole system and how the cryptographic processes are done. And so it's one place in the API that was compromised, but really MPC itself is a new technology, but it brings with it challenges based on the technology itself and the way the processes are done. So the errors, it can be prone to errors, which in turn are prone to security vulnerabilities. And I think the last one on the top of my mind here is just the MPCs also use what they call trusted execution environments, or secure enclaves. They're pretty much hardware-based trusted execution environments that protect keys inside for the wallet itself, and that can be compromised as well. And if you can compromise the trusted execution environment, you compromise the entire wallet as well. So lots of ways still, even though it's a kind of a deemed to be a little bit more effective in kind of wallet management, it still has issues.
So bots, let's talk about bots. They're interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, bots have made their way in many places, not just Web3, but in terms of Web3, they've found a place in many ways in trading. They're used for automated trading, allowing for high-speed transactions to take place. They can take advantage of arbitrage opportunities, for example, and execute, better or more optimal trades in the market themselves. It can be used to be programmed to add or remove liquidity from pools in certain specified conditions. In a kind of less ethical way, they could be used for front running. Bots are, used for front running to really kind of reorder transactions in a block itself to kind of gain profit. And so we have a exploit, a MEV exploit that we covered in the report, where validators were used, MEV validators were used to be exploited, or a rogue validator was used to front run and profit up to $25 million, right? And so that's an example where bots are used or abused in this regard. In terms of potential for the future, there's a lot of potentials out there. I mean, you look at AI. AI is playing such a big role now. If you kind of combine AI with what's happening now, and that you suddenly become in a situation where bots are more intelligent and more sophisticated in trading strategies, and they can learn from the market. They can have data points coming in, they learn, and then they adapt their bot automations based on what they're learning with AI. So that for sure, I think, is going to happen. And then generally speaking, smart contract interactions, you can have bots that are used to interact with smart contracts, to kind of participate in maybe, staking, even DAO decision making,
Wow.
whatever. And that's doable for sure, right? On the flip side, you can even have a bot to be used for improving security. What I mean by that, so I mean, you can have a bot monitor transactions. Typically, we're even within Certik, we look for on-chain data of what's happening for suspicious activity. People can use bots to do that as well. They can have bots just take in data, monitor transactions, identify suspicious activity, intervene where they see potential fraudulent activity happening without the human kind of sitting day and night watching it. The bots could do that, right?
Yeah, they can sometimes be your friend or sometimes be your enemy, depending on.
Yeah, depending on what you want to use it for sure.
So tell me about the atomic wallets, because I don't know a whole lot, but what are the weaknesses of that structure?
Well, I mean, there's no confirmed attack vector for the atomic wallet hack itself. In actual fact, the atomic wallet downplayed it a lot in terms of the amount of losses. It was first kind of reported as around 1% of users that lost funds, and then they downplayed it even further to 0.1% of losses. But what it seems to be is really kind of similar to what is a Web2 attack. It's a key compromise. It's a private key compromise. In this regard, what was speculated is there are seed phrases that are used out there with wallets, and those seed phrases were actually stored on a server somewhere.
Okay.
And when they were stored in plain text. So, the hacker was able to compromise the server and pull off those seed phrases, and then that's it pretty much.
So are they still being stored in plain text on
no, we don't know what the strategy and mitigation of was, but I'm assuming they would fix that, right? And so it seems like an easy fix, right? I mean, it's just encrypt your seed phrases on your server. But it's almost like it feels like a centralization problem where, like, if you go to the Web2 world, we have the same problem where in the cloud, people store their keys by mistake, or they leave them in the cloud. And then what hackers do is they just go searching around looking for open resources that are storing keys. It's so searchable and available, and then they store the keys, and they start their attack from that point onwards. And so Atomic Wallet was that kind of thing of just bad security controls, putting seed phrases in the open and open text, and kind of similar to the Slope Wallet attack that happened some time back. Again, it was the same principle of kind of a private key exploit. And so, for us, we don't just live in the Web3 world. We do have fringe points that we have to look at, and we have clients that we work with on those fringe points in terms of, the off-chain scenarios where it's inside, wallet, or there is a marketplace or a Discord server, and that's where it all starts. I mean, you can socially engineer an attack in social media. In a Discord server where you can start off by a clickbait attack with a prime user in a project to get them to just pass their keys over, right, or compromise their device to get to their private keys.
Convincing them that you're there to help them, or you're there to give them some bonus, or
or just pretending you're actually one of the workers of that project, or that's at a higher, more superiority than saying, hey, could you deal with this situation for me? I need it right now, and here's the link, and it's a clickbait, right? And so they somebody just deals with it, they click, and then there's basically an exploit that takes place from there on, and the keys are compromised, and then the attack traverses from there. So that person obviously gets the private keys, can now move on to moving into an area where the funds are stored, right? Compromise that. And so, a lot of folks kind of look at this as, and it is true that to a certain extent, blockchain decentralization is secure. It's a means to be more secure. But what's running on top of that is quite different in terms of security. You've got, smart contracts that are exploitable. And then you got fringe points on the edge here, which are off-chain, that are exploitable, like wallets or Discord servers or, marketplaces, right?
Do you see bridges, the security of bridges improving?
I laugh because it's been a movie that's been playing out for the last 2-3 years. I don't know. I just know it's a continuing problem that this has not been solved. Like bridge attacks, that $3.7 billion I mentioned in 2022, a lot of it, if you go look at our report, if you want to do kind of some analysis and go back and look at the other reports we have, a lot of the 2022 report losses were tied into bridge attacks, and so we did start to see a lot of kind of exploits happening around those. And the reason for the amount being so large is because that bridge is it's interconnecting lots of chains. So the ability to get a bigger win in funds is there because it's a bridge, right? And so if you compromise the bridge, you get to compromise multiple points coming into the bridge. Interestingly, Poly Network got attacked for the second time, you saw, and the tune was, I can't remember what it was, something really substantial, but finally the funds were locked in such a way that the final number wasn't as large. But it just points to, to your point, it's just continuing to see that bridge attacks are coming up, and why is that not a problem that should be solved? I don't really know. I think we're not going to go away from bridges anytime soon. I think the impact of the bridge is so big because of what it does.
How the interoperability is so great.
Interoperability that makes it such a crown jewel for the hacker to go after. But it still comes down to code at the end of the day, and exploitable code. So being able to write better, more secure code to prevent it.
In keeping our space secure, do bounties really work?
So bug bounties are interesting from the perspective it opens up to crowdsourcing, and crowdsourcing by its nature is getting out of your own wheelhouse and looking for other expertise. And some people think, well, aren't you opening up to just hackers, coming in and playing a role here with bounties? Well, I mean, we call them ethical hackers. That's what we call them. There are people who are just as skilled as hackers, black hats. I mean, the ethical hackers are called white hats. And so there are people out there who are, maybe they turn from black to white, I don't know, in terms of their lifestyle. But let's just say they are skilled. And so it's crowdsourcing to expand your skill set, to find more issues or vulnerabilities. And for my entirety in the security space I've been in, I've seen it work in Web 2 and I've seen it work in Web 3, because what it does, it incentivizes the best of the best out there who are outside of your wheelhouse to come and solve a problem. It basically, it's almost like the old wild west when you put a warrant out for the capture of dead or alive, right? You get all sorts of posse of cowboys come up and to get that bounty, to get that money. in a similar way, and whoever the best shooter is wins the bounty, right? But here's the similar thing. It's you're calling out for the best out there to find bugs, and you're incentivizing them with a reward, a bounty, to find it. And what you're doing is you're getting outside of the expertise of the wheelhouse you're in, or the limits of that, to then pulling in other people who are ethical in finding these issues and using money to incentivize them. So absolutely, it does work.
Are there bounty hunters within the web space that can make a living at that, or is it just side gig for them?
They actually, don't quote me on this, but yeah, there are people who make money out of this. They sit and they move around in different bounty platforms, and they look for bounties to go after. And obviously bounties are, depending on how critical the bug is, will pay out differently.
So they'll have a tier structure. If you find a minor problem, it doesn't pay so much, but a big exploit vulnerability will pay a lot of money. I didn't know they did it that way.
So there'll be anything from a medium bug to a critical severity bug, and the tier and money will change as well. The other thing I find interesting, and this has been done out there with bug bounties, is it's gamified, and by that, the bug bounty platforms out there promote the ethical hackers in a gamified way.
Like giving them recognition and
giving the recognition. It's almost like you're playing some type of Xbox game or something, and you're getting scores, and your name goes to the top. So they actually promote them and say so and so, whatever pseudonym they have, right? But they get to the top, and they're classified as like top of the leaderboard in terms of the bounty hunters, and so they like that. Why do they like that? Because they can go point to that in another platform and say, look how many bug bounties I acquired, and look where I am. And so, yeah, I mean, some of them do make their living out of this. There's a lot of big bounties out there.
Yeah, I would imagine if they build their reputation, they might get hired by the NSA or some other entity that could give them, for however long they would like, a very good living that is maybe more secure or more on a reliable basis because they're paid a salary. I mean, that might be one stepping stone for some of them, I think, to get into a mainstream job, maybe.
Yeah, and so it doesn't stop at an individual. Even for Certik, we kind of turn it inside out as well. I mean, we have our own bug bounty programs, by the way. So we create bug bounties for ethical hackers to join and find bugs. But internally, we also have folks who are security experts that go out and contribute to bug bounties as well. And so, the most prevalent one that was in the news was the Sui hamster wheel attack that took place, where Certik security people found a critical bug.
Yeah, congratulations. That's in
got
your
paid,
report.
$500,000 in terms of reward for that. Not to go into detail of what that was, but there's a really detailed report you can go download from our resources page, or not download, you can actually just view it. But just to say that not only do we run bug bounties, we also, as a team internally, security team, we go out looking in a similar way, go looking for platforms that are promoting bounties and solve that. It's a business, right?
Yeah. Jalal, tell me, what are the biggest mistakes that builders make when they are coding?
I think the biggest mistake that developers and builders make is keeping security in the background, and it be kind of an afterthought. And you can't blame, given the speed of development with processes like CI/CD. It is really a fast process for pushing code out. security is an afterthought. It's almost like you're having to do your taxes at the last minute, or you're having to do something that is not within your interest. And so developers are there to create the next big application or push the next, project out the door as quick as possible, because they want to get out there and claim fame or be be exceptional in the space they're in. And so with that, the mistakes that are made is one, really coding is not secured early. It's not reviewed the right way by security experts early in the life cycle. The practices of secure coding are not implemented the right way. They're not educated early with programmers, and they're just left to kind of stay in the code until even launching and getting out the door. The thing that is also a problem that we've seen is there are tendencies that, even though there is an issue and it's reported out there, the developers may not want to fix that. And a good example of that is centralization issues, which is, if you go look at our audit reports, you'll see a good amount of what we report, the issues that sit on those reports. Some of those are centralization issues, and a centralization issue is basically where you're giving permissions or access permissions to a single user. And if that user gets compromised, that's a centralization, then the whole thing is compromised. And from a developer's point of view, that's natural because of the way they develop their code. They want to be able to, as a developer, have control because they're developing their code, so they have access to that code. They will sit in a centralized way for developing that. However, they will not move that code out of into a kind of decentralized way when they finally launch. It's almost kind of being lazy, and they go out the door, or they kind of launch and they see it flagged in the report and they just they don't change it, which results in a compromise of that issue, right? So I mean, a good amount of it, I think, to me, is education, because the cost of an attack is far greater found later versus found earlier, right? If you can educate developers way early in the life cycle, then the impact is far less, right? And simple things where you can do code reviews, you can involve security specialists early in the life cycle to look at code, or you can kind of look at security attack models by bringing security experts in the organization to look at the code and put together architectures and attack models around the code. You can actually weed out a lot of the problems early and minimize the impact of an exploit that can happen down the road, right?
Do some projects have you look at the code like early on and then halfway through and then finally at the end right before launch? Or does everybody usually wait?
Yeah, I think we get projects come to us in different stages where they're anywhere from, hey, I've got an idea to, and we say, okay, but have you coded it yet? It's like, no, but I've got an idea. And we say, okay, come back when you're ready and you have a code base we can look at, to, finally it's just about to go out the door. So there's different places we can execute on the audit. We also kind of provide remediation examples. We're not going to remediate on behalf, right? The report that we produce gives guidance of how to fix stuff. But it's like, I don't know, it's like going to the dentist and the dentist saying, you need to floss your teeth, otherwise you're going to get cavities. And you kind of say, yeah, don't worry about it, I've got it. And then 6 months later, you got a cavity. And so we're not certifying that it's secure. We're providing, an auditing service where we're exposing the risk of the code through different found issues and giving recommendations to fix. But onus is on the owners and the project and developers to fix that. Now they can say, yeah, sure, I fix it later. And they launch, the hacker sees the code, exploits it, and that's it, right? And that's really the kind of, in this industry, that's the challenge I see with security, is security so not always can be in a position where it can govern the situation, especially on just providing it as a service to developers. It's up to the developers to do something about it. And sometimes they do if they really are embracing security. Sometimes, maybe not. Right?
Take a risk or take their chance.
Take a risk. And the taking a risk, by the way, in the spectrum is anywhere from like massive 100% risk to 0 risk, depending on how they're running their organization.
Have you ever come across a project that didn't? I mean, that was just perfect. Like the code was just.
I don't know. I mean, the little dirty secret. I used to be a developer about many moons ago. I don't think there's such a thing as perfect code, because it's humans that are writing it, so there's always potential for a bug, right? Like in our business, by the way, we're providing a more effective auditing process. It's not just the human eye that's looking at it. We have experts that have found many vulnerabilities over many chains and ecosystems, and that is just expertise for many years. However, we're using other methods like formal verification, which brings mathematical algorithms to actually find more effective code, effective ways of finding vulnerabilities in code. But still, I mean, code is code. It's it's going to have bugs somewhere. Right?
Yeah. Is AI going to help and assist, or does it eventually
I mean, I think it could, to the bot question you had, I think AI can play a role in helping looking at data from the perspective of, I'd say, historical vulnerabilities, right, in the past. I don't think it is. I did a talk in Paris probably about 3 months ago or 2 months ago, I can't remember, about AI playing a role within security and more specifically in vulnerability findings. If you look at AI, generally, you could teach it things, right? And you say, look, this is a piece of cheese. This is a baseball. This is a piece of cheese. You see the difference, right? And AI will recognize the difference. Then you'll pick up 2 pieces of cheese and say, this is Swiss cheese and this is cheddar. Do you know the difference? And AI might not understand that subtle difference. So I think there's coarse-grained things AI can help on in security, and to solve and alleviate, the manpower situation. But there are things that are just so complex to find and understand, and it only takes experience with people who's been in the space for quite some time to find it. Chat GPT, I don't know, 3.5 or 4, I don't know what it was actually used by somebody to audit some code. Yeah. And I can't remember, this was kind of a gambling project or something like that. They used it to audit a project before actually coming to us, and they, Chat GPT put up all these vulnerabilities, and some of them were kind of, oh, okay, that's interesting. They were kind of the easy ones to find, but then a good amount of it, Chat GPT got it wrong, and it was just incorrect. And so maybe it's AI finding as good as the data that it has and the algorithms that it has and all that good stuff, right? But I don't think you can ever be in a situation where you rely 100% on AI to do the human's job. I don't ever see that happening.
Yeah, interesting. So we talk about when you have rug pulls, for example, you've got scammers, people who are in the space that are planning to actually steal from people. How do we best vet these kinds of people?
Well, it's voluntary. We don't enforce KYC. So we do have a KYC process and service, and it's that human verification that I was talking about. And we actually launched this in 2022, start of 2022. And it was only, like I mentioned, rug pulls were just kind of taking off. It was going crazy. And we decided, oh, there is a human problem here, or there's a human security issue here in Web3. And we decided as a company to invest in the best security analysts out there. And I mean the best. Pick your three-letter acronyms out there, security, intelligence, or people that are been in this space, and we've gone and recruited them. And so we built out a team and a business unit inside the company to deal with KYC. Now, KYC is it's kind of it's a service available, but it relies on the project wanting to do that service. And we promote people who actually pass KYC. And if you think about the trust model within community and people who actually invest in tokens, they are in a better position to see that a project has been KYC'd than to go and invest in a project that's not KYC. And so we've built out a lot of promotional mechanisms within KYC, that when a project does go through KYC verification, we promote them on our leaderboard. We give them badges. We, depending on the severity or depending on how good the KYC score comes out, they will get a gold badge, a silver badge, or a bronze badge, but they'll get a badge. And that actually adds a lot of weight to their investments and the community investing in them by having that. So projects do come to us and say, hey, I want a KYC, because they know that benefit is there and it allows it to happen. Now, in terms of what the KYC is, I can't go into detail of what we do, but it is a very rigorous process that looks at a lot of fraud signals. It's not a typical thing that you would see where you're applying for a bank account or whatever, and somebody says, hey, give me your your driver's license, right? Yeah. And comes back. It is an interview. It's a face-to-face video interview.
Interesting.
And we're looking at, even facial characteristics, moves and everything, and temperaments and body posture and all sorts of, there are a lot of deep signals that we are going through. And we get to the end of it. We do keep the data private, by the way. We don't expose people's information, but we do get to the end of it, and either that project passes the KYC verification or it doesn't. And we don't go out exposing that they didn't pass. We do keep the information private, but we also do share information out there with law enforcement in case they want to go after these criminals. But that's all kind of in the background. But we don't expose the information, private information for those people.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting, because even the people who have been KYC'd, I mean, the amount of projects that are launching with anonymous founders is less and less, but there's still even the problems of those that have voluntarily KYC'd themselves. Still, greed sometimes takes over, and it's hard to protect against that, I think. And there's real experts that can pass those tests that you do too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as straightforward either from our perspective. We do see some interesting plays in terms of actors, proxy actors, we call them, being played in the KYC process. We get people being paid to participate on behalf of the project, even though and we do we do fire signals on that. We look for that as well. But people sometimes try and circumvent, masquerade the KYC process by getting other people in front of it and not the true scammers, right, in there. I think even on the dark web, you can pay for KYC actors to to participate and act on your behalf, right? So there are ways, even though KYC has come about here in helping solve or try to solve this rug pull scammer situation, there are still the scammers are getting smarter. There's still thoughts and ways of how to kind of circumvent the whole KYC process, and we as a team look for that. We can see it.
I wonder if there's a business there for you to teach. A lot of these projects will have the founders give an AMA, for example, and you talk about how you are skilled to look at different body language and the way people answer questions. I wonder if there's actually a business for you to share some of that information with people who are watching founders give AMAs to teach.
Yeah, I mean,
some level up within the community.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I can't go into details, but we have been tapped on the shoulder for our KYC team to look at verifying other platforms out there which have people who participate in those platforms. So the industry is recognizing the importance of what is Web3 KYC, and more so Certik's rigorous KYC process. And there are people out there who are coming to us and saying, "Hey, we see what you guys do, and the intensity of it. Can this be applied over here?" And then we go take a look at it and go, "Oh, actually, we could do that," because it's it's lendable, right? You can look at those things that we do and go, "Okay, well, why wouldn't you do it onto somebody else's platform, and verify people, doing something else on somebody else's platform? That's a service that other platform needs. So they're looking for that. Why can't we help them?" So yeah, there is situations like that where we can adapt to doing other things beyond just KYCing projects within our own business.
I would imagine you're busy, and I think when someone applies to get an audit completed, it might have this lag time of you are put into a queue, and then your time comes up. I would imagine that there's a waiting time, and then within that waiting time, when you actually get to a project, how long does it take to finish that audit? Like, give me on the shortest and on the average and then on the longest range.
You're probably not going to like the answer, but I'll try and answer it as best I can. It revolves around the expression, how long is a piece of string, right? And you'll understand what I mean by that in a bit. But generally, so before I kind of preface this with one statement here, we have a lot of projects that we've audited. To date, we've audited number of audits completed is like over 5,000.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere on the report. I think I read it was 7,000, more than 5,000 projects, but maybe that 5.
Well, I think it's over 5,000. So if it's somewhere near 7, that's probably where it is. But in terms of projects, it's over 4.5 or nearly 5,000. So projects can have multiple audits as well.
Right.
And so like we're scaled out. The difference between Certik and other auditors is you'll find that we solve the scale problem. In actual fact, if you look at like how we do that, not only are we reliable, we're putting in mechanisms to go as fast as possible. We're putting in validation and checks on our own auditors to make sure that the audits are effective, that they do, right? And so everything's speeding up as fast as we can. And the experience of the audits that have been done in the past allow us to be better, right? And so as we bring on more ecosystems and chains and audits and findings, what we've seen in the past, we're able to recognize and also become even more effective. It's kind of like riding a bike. You know, if you're first riding a bike or riding a bike for the first time, you're just going to stumble and, you know, find your way about it. But if you've spent a lot of hours riding a bicycle, eventually you'll do a wheelie, right? Or you'll be so experienced. And so with experience and volumes comes this ability to be more effective as well, right? Now, how long is an audit? Really, it depends. It depends on many aspects. It depends on the technology, the language that it's written in, the chain that it's kind of riding on, or it's being deployed on. It depends on the number of lines of code, even, right? 1,000 lines of code is obviously different to 1,000,000 lines of code. And so from the point of request, within a couple of weeks, you're actually onboarded. That's typical, right? But from that point on, once an audit starts, it is and does depend on those factors: technology, lines of code, the ecosystem it's with. Some of it is more complex than others. Some of the code is written in a specific for a specific segment that could be even more complex than a typical other segment that is out there. So it does depend. And that part of the life cycle and time I can't give you, because it would just be kind of kidding you, right? It could be anywhere from even a couple of weeks to a month or 6 months. I mean, it depends how many lines of code, depends how complex, all that good stuff, right?
Is there one language that's more difficult to audit than another? Like, what's the easiest language to audit and what's the most difficult?
I don't think I think there's definitely usage of languages out there. Certainly Rust and Solidity are kind of most common languages. But there are newer languages that are coming about now, which take time for adoption as well as learning. And so with the more common languages, they're easier, of course, because they've been out there longer. And so we get it, right?
For Cardano, their language is a little unique, right? So I think it may be not widely used across the ecosystem. So you would have to find people that are skilled within their language set, I imagine.
Yeah, I think we've audited on Cardano as well. So those are kind of examples where, whether it's Move for SUI or it's a particular style of language, we have we get to being experts to audit, or we have people, we've hired people, and we have that expertise.
Yeah.
And it's a moving target, I'd say, for any auditor out there. As things evolve and new languages come out, new ecosystems, that's moving, right? And everybody has to follow. You got to understand that language, understand the technology, and learn it. And internally at Certik, we're continually learning, and we're moving along at the same pace.
So you have a security suite that I think people would be interested in if they wanted to use your services. Maybe just give a quick overview of that.
Yeah, I mean, so we tout the strategy of end-to-end security, and it's mostly around the story I kind of laid out of where Certik started in its journey and where it is today, based on how Web3 has evolved. When we first started, it was all about audits. We were providing effective audits, and we're still providing effective audits. But as we recognized, it doesn't stop there. Once you launch code, you're now running on chain somewhere. And so looking at data in terms of an analysis and continuous assessment of the smart contract for vulnerabilities and suspicious activity happening with transactions on chain with that project is another part of a service, which is Skynet, right? You can see that on our product page. And we, even with Skynet, we've evolved now to, in many ways, to be more community-centric, not just business-centric. And so if you go to skynet.certik.com, you'll see a lot of things are catered for both the business and community in giving them the information they need, data, insights, security insights, alerts, market information, sentiments to do with social media, either negative or not. There's a lot of information for doing research and understanding what's going on in the project, where community or the project itself needs to know what's going on. So we went from just kind of static analysis of code to now dynamic real-time analysis of data, on-chain data using Skynet.
Data.
And then, as I mentioned before, the KYC service did come into play early last year, only because of the ramp up of rug pulls. We recognized the need for that. So we went from auditing to Skynet to our KYC processes now and services. And then we talked about bug bounty today as well. We launched our bug bounty service because we respected the idea of ethical hackers and crowdsourcing with ethical hackers. Yeah, I mean, I think, and we do advisory services as well, and incident response. We are out there in terms of alerting. We have alerting mechanisms that sit both on our Twitter as well as other channels, other social media channels, where the media and community are alerted as when incidents happen. So that mechanism is there as well. But really, it's an evolution that's been happening for us as we have recognized the need to solve a problem, another security problem. We've recognized a need to invest and build to create that service. And so, you know, even with the services I've mentioned, which, by the way, is you know, it's a far larger expansion in services than any other Web3 security player in the industry. It's still going to grow, right? It's still going to expand over time because Web3 is still evolving. So we will find situations where, you know, maybe we start expanding into wallets and fund transfers and monitoring that, and it goes on and on and on. And you know, we tout ourselves as securing the Web3 world, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, you're going to be very busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Security makes you busy. That's what I hear.
Where's the best place for people to follow what the company's doing, and should they want to get in touch with you and use your services? How do you advise that?
Yeah, so great question. The best places really are on social media. Our Twitter accounts, both Certik and community, as well as Alert, are great places to follow us and see what we're doing and understand what we're up to and what we're launching. And even from an education perspective, if you go to our resources page on our website, we have you know, a ton of information in terms of understanding you know, crypto security, Web3 security, and technology around it. So those are the places I would recommend to go look into.
I know you're doing these reports quarterly, but I imagine you'll probably have enough to talk about to do them monthly soon.
Yeah, we've had this dilemma. It's a great question, because we've had this dilemma of like, should we go faster? I think sometimes the suspense keeps people on edge, you know, in terms of like waiting for that report to come out in Q3. I've been very pleasantly surprised that you know, our report, when I launched it 2 years ago, has become so credible in the industry. Not only have we seen people start to copy the report, by the way, we've actually been kind of recognized and referenced in many tier one outlets, from the, you know, the Forbes, the Bloombergs, to more Web3 based CoinDesk or Cointelegraph. It is an anticipated report when it does come out. Bringing it, you know, we've talked about monthly, but bringing it monthly may kind of dampen the kind of suspense from what's going to come out. But however, having said that, we do on our alert, Certik alert channel on our Twitter, we do actually put out kind of monthly summaries of what's been happening. It's not a report, but it's kind of more infographic of what events have taken place for that month. So
yeah, just as a user of this space, I'd love to see some attention also given to educating the users out there. That would be really nice to see Certik do, you know, whether it's, you know, look out for these flags or the 10 things you want to do before you connect your wallet. You know,
yeah, so that's what I was referring to. If you actually go to our resources page, we have, I want to use the word plethora because it feels like it. It's a really deep content base of education from anywhere from what is, you know, Web3 security to, you know, the top 10 things you should do to protect your smart contract or whatever, right? And so that was one thing we wanted to do, is to be kind of promoting ourselves as the kind of not only the leader in the space on security, but also the educator, to the point I was raising with you before of educating early in the life cycle will actually severely, you know, minimize the impact, right? And so providing people literature and content around education of how to secure themselves in a better way is really our principles there. And so yeah, I encourage people to go check out resources on our website, because we do have a lot of content.
I'll be sure to put that link in the description of this video.